Tracy was saying that it's gotten to the point, even in your short time here, that you're being received much differently now when it comes to recruiting pitchers, because people are seeing the development piece of it, and that they can come here and be successful just like an offensive player can. Can you talk about that and the kind of reception you're getting now and trying to bring pitchers here?
Yeah, I mean, we hope that would happen. And we've got, I think, a great product here and great tradition and great academics and all those things. And when I got here, we want to just change the narrative a little bit on how we were going to develop. And we put together a plan that I think is good. We're making sure that recruits see that plan and see how committed we are to not just their development, but the development of an entire pitching staff and winning games on the mound, which is something that we want to be able to do. So I think it's been good. I think that depending on who you deal with on the recruiting scenario or on the recruiting landscape, you've got some hopefully stored up money in the bank with some of those guys. You've done a good job with their pitchers. So the word spreads amongst those coaches that you've helped take care of guys and helped guys develop. So, it's word of mouth and trust. And as we continue to prove ourselves on the mound, we hope that trust continues to spread out all over the nation and guys want to come here to pitch. And that's the main goal.
Jacob.
Hey, JK, I'm curious what you think the biggest differences are between your pitching staff this year and what they bring to the table and what you had last year. Because we've heard that this year there's a little more talent spread out from top to bottom than there was last year. What would you say the biggest difference is?
I think if you go down the list from top to bottom, everybody's gotten better. And that's what is important. There's a lot of the same pieces to the puzzle, but there's a little bit more experience. There's a little bit more trust. They have feel for the system. They know what they need to do to get better. As I go down the list, almost every guy has added something, whether it's a new breaking ball, the changeup, cutting it, sinking it, kind of little intricacies of pitching. But almost everybody has done that, and that's not a credit to me. That's a credit to them wanting to work. And we've got a really good culture here, I think, in the group of just communicating with each other and learning from each other and each other's experiences and having the new guys come in and see the Cam Denny's who got thrown in the fire and the Bryce Barnetts and Christian Bodlovich and some of these guys that had to go right away and they're learning from those guys. So I think that the group is doing a good job of teaching itself and developing itself with just a little bit of help from me, making sure they're going in the right direction.
Alex.
Hey, JK, who have been some of those guys who have made sort of the bigger progressions from where the season ended to where you guys are standing right now?
Off the top of my head, Brady Corrigan's been great. He's added a curveball and the slider's gotten firmer. He's been really, really good. Graham Osman, I heard Ben talk about him as I walked in, has been great. Velocity is up, has added a harder breaking ball that's going to help him. Cam Denny's added a curveball to the slider combination, which is going to allow him to disrupt timing. Boyd's been great with the slider. That was a pitch that was kind of developing for him and has gotten better and better. Justin Fall with the sinker is something that he started learning about this time last year. And we tried to take it right into the ball games in the spring, and there was some success and some failure with it, but he's way better with it now. I mean, you can go down to Coop's been great. Coop's gotten himself in incredible shape and is, becoming a leader in our group and really on the work ethic end has taken himself to the next level. So we've seen some 93, 94s from him, which is great. So as a group, I think they've really taken that next step and we've hopefully instilled some freedom in them to take responsibility for themselves and get better. And they're running with it.
Gareth.
How's it going, JK? And you had mentioned just that most of this pitching staff, it still has most of the pieces from last year. Most of the pieces are the same. I mean, is it nice to knowing coming into this season that you still have, at least until the season got canceled, your Friday, your Saturday, your Sunday guys still back and basically just running back again for this upcoming year?
Yeah, that's a good feeling going to bed at night knowing you've got 4 guys minimum with starting experience in your group. And guys that I think were just coming into themselves last year as this thing got canceled. So, that's a good feeling. And those guys are pushing each other. When we finished up last year and then everything was officially canceled and we got to communicate a little bit, I made sure that the group understood that the staff or the slate was going to be cleared and we're going to have to come in and earn jobs and everybody was going to have to earn jobs no matter if you pitched on Friday last year or you didn't pitch an inning. So I think they've taken that to heart. We still haven't determined those roles yet, so they're still competing. So I think having that carrot just dangling out in front of those guys has been really good for them, and also for some of the new guys to realize that they can put themselves in some roles that they like too.
Cole.
Hey, JK, thanks for doing this. I was just curious about, after losing Dabo to the draft, obviously, who are some early candidates for some guys you see kind of locking things down at the back end of the pen?
I think there could be 4 or 5 guys back there. And I had individual meetings with those guys, with everybody over the last 4 or 5 days. And we talked about just kind of matching up with the best case scenario for each guy and how they fit into those scenarios. So, it may be Bryce Barnett on a day. It may be Cam Denny on a day. It may be Justin Fall on a day. Shoot, it may be Graham Osmond on a day, depending on where the lineup is in that exact situation. So I think we've got 5 or 6 guys. You got Ethan Long, who's been great, and he really fits that role kind of as a presence and the way he competes. So I think we're going to kind of let it play out the rest of the fall. We're going to have some competitive maroon and gold inter squads over the next 2 weeks, and I think that will pull some guys away from the group, and then we'll get into January and do the same. But I'm not going to say anything just yet. And I've talked to those guys, and they're all in. I think best case scenario for us as a team is if we had 5 guys with 4 saves, 5 saves, kind of mix it around, and a guy can close on Friday and another guy can close on Saturday. And I think that's the best case scenario.
Michael.
Yeah, JK, to circle back to what you're saying, obviously when the season shut down last year and some guys, like you were saying, some pitchers were coming into their own, but I mean, even through the separation, were they eager to check in with you? And I mean, were they letting you know what they were working on or seeing what you needed them to work on and improve on and stuff like that? And like you said, I mean, they obviously took it to another level because being away from everybody and coming in looking as good as you say, but were you in a good amount of contact with them, with the pitchers?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. We went through kind of a lull when we first got hit with this thing, and we thought we could come back, and we were very kind of aggressive on making sure that we stayed in shape. Then as in the middle of this, when it became pretty evident that we weren't going to come back, and everything really shut down, and they didn't have the ability to work, that we kind of let things go. And I said, hey, let's take some time off. If you think about this generation of pitchers, some of these guys have thrown 300 days a year since they were 10 years old. So my focus on them was like, hey, we need to shut it down, take the time, and then we'll start over. And they all did it. And some of them went to some personal guys and got some work done and increased some velo. And we found plans, I think, that really helped each guy get better. But those were it was their work for the most part. I mean, they knew what they wanted to do. They would check in and say, hey, what do you think of this? Send me some video and all those things. But I give credit to the group. They took it in their own hands, and with my helping just a little bit of what I wanted, they did it themselves. And I think we're going to see, hopefully, that's all going to pay off as we get into the spring.
Thanks,
Jacob.
You and I a couple times last year talked about how Boyd was really coming into his own because he simplified and he started to just kind of narrow things down to what he was good at, whether that was just throwing fastball, slider, and using the 2-pitch combo to be effective out of the bullpen. Is he kind of a good example of a guy who simplified in the way that you want the rest of the staff to do it in terms of how you're trying to get guys to improve, is just to think about pitching in a very narrow focused way? Is that kind of the theme for you?
To some extent, it is. And I think depending on what your role is going to be within the season, we need to get really good at that. And the goal is development, but it's also got to be development within your role. And if your role is the left-hander out of the bullpen, then we've got to get really good at facing left-handers. And that doesn't mean you won't be a starter at some point in your career at Arizona State, but it means right now we have to be really good at that. And Boyd took some of those things that we worked on early in the fall last year and really got really good at it. And then he doesn't have to worry about some of those things anymore. So as we got into this fall, we could work on some other things. The curveball's coming back, the changeup is developing. So he got so good at the command and the sink and the slider that now we can move on to other things. And that's what development is. It's getting good at one thing and moving to the next. And he's done a really good job of that because that's what he wants. He wants to be great. And he took it into his own hands over the break.
Jeff.
Do you think that with the caliber of position players that you lost, that the pitching staff is, I don't want to say going to carry the team, but will be real instrumental, at least early in the season, until some of these new position players kind of get used to what they're doing?
Yeah, I think that's always the case. I mean, I think that we're going to have to pitch well for the rest of my career here, hopefully, and from beyond that. I mean, that's the goal. So our position players are going to be young, but I may have a little different opinion than Skip or Ben or Mike on the position players. But I think these guys are be really good, and they've put a lot of pressure on us this fall in a lot of different ways that the group last year didn't. Last year you're worried about Torque and Gage and Alika and those guys getting extra base hits. And this group, they'll just hit us to death. I mean, I think we had 15 hits in the last inter squad on one side of the lineup, and it's guys that can control the bat. They get hits. They're tough with 2 strikes. It's just a totally different feel. We're going to run a little bit better. There's pressure on the bases. So I think the position players are good and going to be really good for us. And I think we can be a complete team, as we get into conference. But I think you're right. We're going to have to do our job early to where some of those guys find their footing. And once they do, I think we can be good a couple weeks into the season.
Jacob.
I'm curious what you've seen from Eric Tolman so far and just the improvements that he's made over the offseason.
He's been really good. And his last 2 outings weren't up to his I guess his standards, but that's the way this thing goes sometimes. But his first 3 outings were electric, and the velocity's up. The breaking ball has changed. We went kind of more from a curveball to a hard slider. The changeup has always been an above average pitch for him. He's always been an above average competitor and tough. And now he's really commanding the ball. That's the difference in Eric right now, is he's throwing more strikes than he ever has. And that didn't hurt him in the past. But it's made it so some innings maybe drew on a little longer than others because there was a walk or 2, and now he's not doing those things. And you combine that with his velocity going up a little bit. There's been some 95s in the fall for him and a lot of 93s, and being left-handed with that changeup makes him really effective. But I think his maturity is what I've seen the most kind of progression in is he's not as hard on himself. He's calm. He knows everything. So now it's just about pitching, and it's not about everything around him. He's not hitting anymore. It's just we really simplified things for him, and I think it's helping him.
And just to follow up on that quickly, what exactly is he mixing right now? Fastball, slider, what else is it? What's the mix at the moment?
Fastball, slider change for him right now, with the slider being a little new. I mean, he was slider and curveball last year, and I felt, and I think he agrees, that they kind of became one at times, and we weren't real good at either. So he made him a commitment over the break to become really good with the slider, and it's been really good. I mean, he's throwing it for a strike. He's finishing hitters with it. He can do whatever he wants with it at the moment.
Cole.
Just on the topic of Tyler Thornton, who obviously was really good last season. He came in, he stepped in, did a really nice job. Do you see his role increasing to being, a potential Friday night starter like he showed the likes of last year, or is his role sort of up in the air still?
I think he's in the mix for sure. I mean, he's in that group of 4 right now that is kind of competing for 4 spots, and where they fit in. We're not quite sure yet, but he was really good in his last outing. Velocity was up. I think he kind of went through a lull about 2 weeks ago of just a little bit of dead arm and some fatigue that happens. And he's gotten through that and been really good. So, he's one of those guys that, as you watch him, especially in the bullpen or on some side work sessions, it's not always as impressive as you would think. And then you get him in a ball game, and I mean, he can just command that fastball and throw it by people, and he does things that are hard to put on paper. So you doubt him sometimes because he's not throwing 97 miles an hour, but then you put him in a ball game and you look up the scoreboard and he's through 6 innings, given up 3 hits and struck out 7, and you're like, oh, that's just what Tyler does. He's as consistent a guy as we have.
Garrett.
I was going to ask about Thornton as well, but I guess I'll ask about Justin Fall. Just what you've seen from him. I know he was a guy that showed a lot. He had a good opening night start, and then as the season progressed, it seemed like just command was a bit of a thing. But what have you seen just so far from him early on?
He's been good. He's been a little bit kind of slower to get going because of some stuff early in the fall, but now he's full bore again, and the stuff is elite, and I think everybody knows that. And when you're talking about the break on the slider and the break on the two seamer, it's just consistency for him, and he's been more consistent. And that's what's going to be the key for him, is just having a good feel for that sinker and being able to use the middle of the plate, not try and be too fine. And depending on what his role is, I mean, I think he has a chance to really be a devastating piece out of the bullpen, if that's the way it goes. And then obviously we've seen him have success as a starter too. So I think he's getting better. I think he's taken that next step, and as we know, physically, the sky's the limit for him. And as he controls his stuff better and better, he's going to be that much more of a problem for the rest of the league.